Next up, while the 2020 news cycles have been dominated by a seemingly endless presidential election and deadly pandemic, we've also had a steady background drumbeat of major natural disasters, massive wildfires, historic storms, the number of which have nearly doubled worldwide over the last 20 years. That's according to a recent report from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, which put the blame largely on climate change, saying we are, quote, willingly and knowingly turning our only home into an uninhabitable hell for millions of people, not to mention the more than 1 million species of plants and animals facing extinction. But here in New England, there's at least one species providing a ray of hope: Atlantic puffins. A century ago, they'd been almost wiped out of their habitats along the Maine coast, but today they're thriving thanks in no small part to Project Puffin. It's an effort detailed in a 2016 book and now a new middle school level book called The Puffin Plan: Restoring Seabirds to Egg Rock and Beyond. They were both a product of ornithologist Kress and Derrick, an environmental writing fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, both of whom recently joined me. And I should also note that this photo of Jackson's recently won third place in the 2020 Birdwatching Photography Awards and sits proudly on a wall in my home.
I'm glad you're enjoying that picture.
Oh, I love it. Everybody loves it. You know, Steve, I've spoken to Derrick a bunch of times about your joint work, and the first with you. Do you remember the moment you decided to do this and what your expectation or maybe your hope was? I think back in '73 or something, about what the outcome might be?
I certainly do. I mean, when this all started, Project Puffins, what we come to call it, it was just an idea that I thought would be a summer project to bring this little bird back to a historic nesting island. I had no idea that some 50 years later I'd still be at it.
And by the way, the first couple of years were not very successful, correct?
It took me about 4 years to actually start the project, another 4 years before the puffins showed up for the first time, and then another 4 years. So 12 years of waiting to get the first pair breeding on Egg Rock.
Do you remember the moment when that first puffin returned and what that felt like? I think Derrick once told me a year or so ago, one of your assistants saw it or something like that. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I do remember that very strongly. I was in a small boat out at Egg Rock delivering supplies, and we had not seen a puffin there ever. And all of a sudden I spotted a fast flying bird that caught my eye, and it flew right at me, and it landed plop in the water right next to my boat. I couldn't believe it. It was one of our puffins that I had brought there as a chick 2 years previously.
I love the smile on your face. So I know you haven't been there for the whole 50 years there, Derrick, but can you fast forward for us and try to give us 50 years of history and bring us up to speed in a minute?
Oh, the fastest. I feel like that guy that does the fastest 3 minutes in football. So, you know, the puffins were wiped out on almost all the Maine islands by the 1800s by hunters getting them for their eggs and their meat. And when Steve decided to bring them back, there were only one island in the entire state of Maine where puffins existed at all, and that was because the Audubon Society had started protecting them in 1902. But they couldn't come back on their own without human help because they've been overrun by gulls. So he brought back chicks from Newfoundland, hand-raised them, sent them out to sea, hoping that they would remember Maine as home and not Newfoundland. And it turned out to be a correct guess. And today, Maine, which was down to 2 or 4 puffins in the entire state in 1902, today there are 1,300 pairs on several islands throughout the state.
You know, Steve, this is a glorious story about a beautiful, it's a bird, right? Can I call it? It's a bird, right? I'm using the right terminology. Okay, about a beautiful, I just didn't want to be embarrassed, about a beautiful bird. But I assume that part of the reason you guys have told the story relentlessly is because it's a wonderful example of how that million number extinction could be lowered if people try to replicate something that you've done. That's part of the reason for your work, I'm quite confident, is it not?
Right. Seabirds are grouped as the most imperiled group of birds in the world because they live on islands and they're susceptible to changes all over the world. They're often long-distance migrants. But our methods here are actually being replicated on many other islands. At least 40% of all the species of seabirds in the world have now benefited from some of the
Really?
methods that we've developed on eastern egg rock. Everything from rare terns in China to albatrosses in Japan to diving petrels in Chile and all kinds of birds in New Zealand. They're all benefiting because of lessons learned at Egg Rock. There are many heroes out there, unsung heroes that deserve some attention, because in this day when people are looking for good news stories, there are people making a difference, and it's very satisfying to me to have given them some tools to work with.
Yeah, you surely have. Derrick, so is restoration a done deal, or is this something that requires constant monitoring and work by you and your colleagues to make sure that their population continues to grow?
Well, the number one thing that I took out of working with Steve on this book is that as he has said, there is no such thing as balance. We as humans have so altered the planet that most species will need some form of human intervention probably forever. The fact that we have changed things so much that certain predators would overtake certain birds that we're trying to protect. A great example was the restoration of the bald eagle, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's a chief predator of puffins. And so on Eastern Egg Rock and the other islands of Project Puffin, if humans were not there to scare away the eagles would wipe out the puffin chicks in a nanosecond.
Well, gentlemen, I know you know this, but it's a beautiful and hopeful story in a sea of bad news. So congratulations to you both. Good luck with the new book, and it's great to see you both as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for having us on and helping us talk about the puffins over and over.
We appreciate
Derrick,
it,
it's
Jim.
great to
Thank
see
you.
you. Steve, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The book again is The Puffin Plan, Restoring Seabirds to Egg Rock and Beyond.